Today on Spider-Man 2099, what if he fights a cyborg version of himself? This is the Comicstorian channel. I take some of your favorite trade paperbacks, single issues, we cut out a lot of the fluff storylines, only tell you the important bits, and we trim down the panels. This allows you to understand what is going on in your favorite comic books while not completely spoiling them so that you can go buy them and add them to your collection if you so choose. All alterations are to prevent copyright problems. Today we're continuing the storyline of Spider-Man 2099, which at this point we're on issues 26 to 30, which means that we have 26 issues in which Miguel O'Hara has been beaten down and realized that no one wants to trust Spider-Man and no one wants to deal him. He's finally at the end of his rope. He doesn't know what to do. So he decides to team up with another woman that he just met and go check out another facility, which of course won't end well because this is a Spider-Man book. If you enjoy this type of content, please consider hitting like, but let's get into Spider-Man 2099, issue 26. After his conversation with Conchetta, Tyler Stone once again returns to Alchemex, where he finds Casey strapped to a table. The guard salutes and informs him that they've already begun to study her and issue punishment for her crimes against the Corps. But Stone shakes his head. "Get that armor off of her and get her out of here. I'll give you the address of where to drop her off," he tells his men. Shocked, they begin to question why they would allow her to leave. "Sometimes circumstances make us do strange things," Tyler Stone tells them quietly. Meanwhile, Miguel is leaping across the city, still reeling from the fact that Tyler Stone is his father. He stops, wondering how life could get any worse for him, and then he looks up as rain begins to pelt him on his face, and he sighs and continues home. Outside the city, in a place known as Nightshade, Miss Pivot reports to her superior, Angie. She tells her that their information indicates that Alchemex will be sending a raider team to acquire their independent research. "We fought them before. We can do it again, Miss Pivot," Angie tells her. They both turn to the holding cell as Angie asks how Subject 394 is doing. Rather aggressive, it turns out, Miss Pivot tells her. So Angie nods and sighs as she listens to the subject hammering against the walls, cracking the mortar beneath their feet. "No one said gene manipulation would be easy," she says, and they both agree that if they need to, they will be forced to let him out. She walks over to the cell, looking at the subject. "Sergeant Estevez, how are you doing today?" she asks, and his monstrous eyes narrow down on her. "Great," he growls at her. Meanwhile, out in the city, Miguel walks through his dark apartment, rain pattering against his windows, and he sits in the dark, tears falling from his eyes as everything hits him in a wave. "You seem taciturn, Miguel. Do you wish me to hold your calls?" Lila asks from the shadows. The lights all come on and Miguel looks up in shock, surprised to see Lila back, and he leaps up to hug her, but he goes straight through the hologram. "It is pleasing to see you well, Miguel," she says with a smile, and she turns back to him, apologizing for recently trying to kill him. But after they quickly catch up, Miguel asks if she can scramble a call for him. "Of course," she says with a nod. "I want a direct line to Stark Fujikawa. Tell them that Spider-Man wants to talk to their CEO," he tells her. Meanwhile, over at Gabe's apartment, he's still distraught over letting Casey be taken. But his mother is barely listening, continuing to clean the apartment as she tells him that everything will be okay. That's when they hear the sound of flyboys approaching, making Gabe rush to the door. But he's shocked to see them drop Casey in the streets and just leave. He rushes over to her, grabbing her as she stumbles and falls into his arms. "I've got you, sweetheart. It's okay. I'll keep you safe, don't worry." Meanwhile, the Stark Fujikawa CEO looks up at the large image of Spider-Man, questioning how he knows that he is the real thing. "Wait, I know you. The limo! I saved your butt!" Spider-Man shouts as he recognizes the man that he saved the day that the city's internet went crazy. The CEO nods, explaining that he took the necessary steps to balance the scales after Spider-Man defeated the Specialist. He explains that the Specialist was important to their company, so they found someone that seemed important to him. And they put the armor on Casey, and they pointed her at Alchemex, knowing that the company would arrest her and take her away. "As far as we're concerned, the scales are now truly balanced. We found Casey. We can find others that are important to you. I'd advise you to not force my hand," the CEO tells him before ending the call. Miguel is still angry, but he stops as he hears Dana at the door, and he quickly begins to change as Lila lets her in. Finally stumbling out of the bedroom in his robe, Dana storms around the apartment, angry at Miguel. "At last I understand why you've been so distant lately. Why have you kept such weird hours? You're seeing her again, aren't you? Seeing Xena," she says huffedly. Miguel shakes his head, telling her that Xena only came to fix Lila, nothing more. "Just out of the goodness of her heart? Don't make me laugh, Miguel," she snorts. She keeps arguing, but Miguel isn't in the mood, asking her to leave. Dana isn't listening though, and Miguel finally snaps, throwing a cup of coffee at her, shouting for her to get out. She runs off, and Miguel slumps, whispering for her to come back, that he doesn't want to be alone. He falls to his knees in his apartment, the rain still falling outside the window. The next day, Xena cheers as Miguel gives her a 20th century gumball machine for fixing Lila. She can tell that he's down though. And to cheer him up, she asks him to go on vacation with her, joining her on a trip out to the Nightshade lab to see what they're working on. It'll be nice to have company that can have an intelligent conversation. Even you, Xena jokes. The ideal rest guaranteed. When have I ever steered you wrong? She says to him with a small smile. Xena speeds her 1960s vintage TV show car through the desert, laughing as Miguel covers his eyes, wishing for it all to be over. Finally, they arrive outside Nightshade, with Xena transmitting code so that they will open up the gate of the Independent Science Collective. Meanwhile, over at the Alchemix Talent Search Division, the headhunter looks at all of those gathered around him, smiling, calling the meeting to order, starting his presentation, explaining that they will be hitting the Nightshade Research Center, which is working on gene manipulation, aggressive and well-armed, able to resist our buyout teams. Mr. Stone has decided to send in the big guns. Us. He tells the gathered men in their suits. Everyone nods in agreement and they all lift shiny briefcases onto the table. The headhunter orders them all to open the cases and a strange light fills the room, a light that covers the raiders in a strange shiny substance, and they all sparkle as that light dissipates. The headhunter smiles evilly. Gentlemen, let's have a good shift. At Nightshade, Angie greets Xena and Miguel, not having seen them since she taught at their university. She was very eager to show them around, but suddenly stops and looks at Miguel, questioning whether he is still with Alchemix. Status-wise, you're my rival. You can visit most of the town, but R&D is off limits, she tells him. Miguel isn't happy about that, but nods, walking away. He offers to meet up with them later. Dust, meanwhile, is kicked up in the desert as the Raider team's car points towards Nightshade's facility, scheduled to arrive in 37 minutes. Back over at Gabe's house, Casey finally sits up, with Gabe telling her to take it easy, but Casey just stares at him dreamily. Your secrets are safe with me, she whispers. Gabe is confused, but Casey tells him that she knows that he is Spider-Man. Tries to argue, but she sits up, kissing him. No talk, just action. She whispers as she pulls him down onto the bed. Meanwhile, back at Nightshade, Miguel is happy to walk around, smiling as the robotic dog runs circles around him. But he's interrupted as an alarm goes off. Inside, Xena looks up from Subject 34's holding cell as Angie tells her that they are under attack. Alchemix, most likely, Angie tells her as she leads her away. But in the cell, 34 looks up with a wicked smile. Alchemix. The town's defenses open fire on the Raider team's approaching vehicles. But the cars steer around the blast, opening fire and destroying the Nightshade's defense gate. The gate explodes inward and Miguel jumps to a nearby wall, crawling up it, quickly changing into his Spider-Man costume. I'm not sure what's going on, but if this boils down to Alchemix versus the little guy, I don't have to think too hard whose side I'm on. He thinks to himself as he leaps into the fight as Spider-Man. The headhunter steps out of his car, standing before the gathered citizens of Nightshade. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm the corporate headhunter, and this is a hostile takeover. He calls out to the people of the town, the guards beginning to gather, and the headhunter telling them that if they don't resist, no one will be harmed. But one of the guards doesn't listen, opening fire, and the headhunter deflects the blast with his cane, turning it on the guard, shooting a plasma beam at him, killing him instantly. Anyone else? He asks, but Spider-Man leaps down, punching him across the face, bringing out a shout of surprise from the headhunter. Spider-Man, I've been looking forward to killing you for months! A voice shouts from behind him, and the wall crawler turns to see a massive monster that has appeared. Huh? He says in shock, and the monster smiles down on him. I can't decide who I want to kill first, he says, looking at both Spider-Man and the corporate raiders. The monster rushes the entire group, roaring in anger. Travesty! That's what the scientists of Nightshade have made me, but it's worth it if it means I get to kill you, Spider-Man! He shouts, but Spider-Man leaps over his attacks, not sure why Travesty is trying to kill him. Whatever I've done to you, would a written apology help? He jokes as he avoids another attack, but Travesty laughs, attacking with the tendrils that come out of his head. He dodges another attack, trying to web up the monster, but in Travesty's head, a voice begins to speak to him. Blast it, Estevez! Ignore Spider-Man, this isn't the time or the place, she shouts in his inner ear transmitter, pointing out that Spider-Man's history shows him to be anti-Core and anti-Alchemix. Get out of my head, lady! Getting back at that freak was the main reason I let you muck about in me, he shouts as he tears through the webbing. The headhunter turns to his raiders, shouting for them to spread out. He turns back as Spider-Man leaps in for an attack, but twists and blasts away with his plasma cane. The other raiders throwing their briefcases at Spider-Man, who dodges them only to have them transform into flying drones that begin to chase him. He leaps away as the drones open fire, shooting his webbing out, trying to get clear of all of the civilians. Meanwhile, back in the city, Gabe and Casey are walking through the park, with Gabe trying to tell her that he isn't Spider-Man. But Casey doesn't believe him, thinking that he is still under the stress of trying to hide his identity. Look, let's go on a vacation. You don't have to bring the costume. I don't want you to think that I only love you because you're him. Sure, whatever you say, Gabe finally relents. Meanwhile, back with Spider-Man, he keeps moving, managing to hide near a power generator to throw off the drone's heat sensors. He peeks up from behind the generator, but then whirls around as Travesty comes crashing through the building's roof behind him. I'm gonna chew you up and spit you out, the monster bellows, one of his tendrils flying out, wrapping around Spider-Man's foot. The tendrils snake around the wall crawler's body and throw him to the ground. If you kill me, you'll accomplish nothing, Spider-Man shouts as the drones show up, blasting into Travesty, allowing Spider-Man to leap clear. Meanwhile, in the command center below the town, Angie sighs, turning to Miss Pivot, asking her to take Xena and head to the underground shelter. The two women look at her in shock, but Angie assures them that she isn't planning on being a martyr. After they leave, she taps a few keys and activates Nightshade's self-destruct sequence. Travesty roars again as he destroys the drones, quickly chasing after the fleeing Spider-Man, but Spider-Man has already leapt back into the fight with the Raider team, kicking and punching among them, backflipping away from the Headhunter's plasma blast. The other Raiders grab him and they try to pin him down, but Travesty is there, pulling them off and throwing them away. You tried to kill me first! There's no justice in that! Only Travesty! He picks up one of the shiny men, twisting them around, snapping his body. Don't run away, S-Man! You're next! He bellows. Below, Angie keeps running, heading for the underground shelter, but the wall explodes behind her, throwing her to the ground amongst the rubble. The headhunter steps out of the smoke and destruction, walking up to her. Hello, madame. Are you in charge here? I'm pleased to inform you that you are now a division of Alchemex, he says, holding out a stack of paperwork to her. If it's any consultation, we have an excellent medical plan, he tells her with a smile, but she rolls over, spitting in his face. That was uncalled for. The rest of the team begins to move deeper, but they're shocked to discover the self-destruct sequence. The team immediately springs up and rushes for the exits as the timer hits 1 minute. Outside, Spider-Man hammers against Travesty with his fists, finally knocking the monster down for a moment, and then he whirls around to see the Raiders running, but he leaps, grabbing a hold of the Headhunter. Get over me, idiot! Their R&D is going to blow and most likely take the town with it! That's when a scream gets Spidey's attention and he releases the Headhunter, rushing back into the building. He steps inside, hearing Angie calling for him. Over here. I think something is broken. If it's all the same, I'd like to die in my bed. And he rushes over to move the rubble off of her and off of her broken limbs. Me too. That didn't come out right, he says as he picks her up and he turns back to see Travesty looming in the darkness. He tries to leap over the monster's attacks, but a tendril snakes out, grabbing Angie, pulling her away. He drops, launching another web at him, but that's when the timer reaches 0 and the building explodes around all of them. Some time passes, and the leader of the pack rats surveys the ruins of Nightshade through his binos. All the indies think they're so special, till the cops come and strip mine them, and leave the rest of them for the likes of us, he laughs to his group. He motions forward, their wasteland cruisers speeding towards the remains of the technological city. They move through them, beginning to pick what is left, and from far below, Xena and Miss Pivot watch the foragers do their dark work. Xena is still worried about Angela and Miguel, but Miss Pivot believes that they probably made it to another bunker. As Packrat pulls aside another heap of rubble, his face splits into a smile. Well, what do we have here? Think it's the genuine article? He asks his men as they motion to the still body of Spider-Man, trying to protect Angela, but the woman is dead. The webbing cocoon that he tried to wrap around them failed, and the leader of Packrat looks at his men and turns back to the car. Box them up. We'll bring them back. Meanwhile, over in the city, Dana sits in the dark, sadly staring at a photo of her and Miguel. Her doorbell rings, declaring that Tyler Stone is waiting. She lets him in, but Tyler gives her a huge smile, informing her that he's looking for Miguel, believing that they had fled on a romantic getaway. But I see it, he says, the tears still glistening in Dana's eyes as she tells him that they broke off their relationship. Puts his arm around her, pulls her in close, and tells her that she is a special woman. There's a brief pause before he leans down kissing her, and he immediately pulls away, apologizing for overstepping. I should be going, he says, turning towards the door, but Dana stops him, and she shyly asks if he would like to have dinner with her. He turns back, his face breaking into a grin as he agrees. Xena and the others finally come out of the bunker, and they find Angela's dead body, and the other two women drop to their knees. They place their glasses on her face, and they try to make her dead body look dignified. Xena looks around, sadness still in her eyes. What happened to the four-armed monster? And Spider-Man? He should have saved her. Where did he run off to? But what Xena doesn't know is that Spider-Man is strapped to the front of a convoy of foragers' vehicles. His costume is torn as he swings from two pikes. Meanwhile, Casey and Gabe have boarded the plane for their vacation, with Casey still very happy, believing that Gabe is secretly Spider-Man. But as she continues to talk, Gabe sighs and stares out the window, mad at himself for not having the bravery to tell her the truth. Are you awake yet? Packrat shouts in Spider-Man's ear, forcing him awake, making him flip through the air. He shakes his head, looking down at the group around him, all watching an old episode of Mr. Ed. What's on the monitor? He asks shakily, looking at the black and white program of a talking horse, and Packrat smiles as he motions to the TV. That's our morning program from our treasure trove, The Adventures of a Horse Who Talks. Spider-Man continues to try and shake the cobwebs out of his head, looking around at the forager base. Would you like a Pop-Tart? Someone asks him, holding up a tray of toastery goodness. Spider-Man waves him off, telling the group that he needs to leave, and Packrat nods, with the rest of the foragers pulling their weapons on him. Tell you what, you got a choice. Either you can fight your way out, or you can try and get Junior working, he says, still confused. Spider-Man follows the leader into the next room, where a robot lays on the table, inactive. Miguel leans over the body, trying to explain that he doesn't know much about robotics, but the robot scans him, recognizing his face as Spider-Man and Venom. It combines the personalities from its databases into one and becomes active. Spider-Man pulls away as a bright light fills the room, and when he looks back, a strange version of Spider-Man is sitting up on the table. Well, it took you long enough. I thought you'd never get here, he shouts, leaping at Miguel, jumping into his arms, pulling him in close. I'm gonna be your bestest friend for the rest of your life, if that's okay with you. And if it's not, then I'll kill ya, he shouts gleefully. The weird Spider-Man pulls him in for a hug, but Miguel tries to pull away as the weirdo chokes him, and he finally pushes himself out. Get off me, you cybernetic psycho, he shouts, and Spider-Man looks at him in shock. You don't like me? You shoved me away? The cyborg gasps, sobbing in his hands, one of the foragers stepping forward, trying to comfort him. But the weird Spider-Man whirls around, slashing the man in the throat. Who asked you? We were having a genuine moment. I didn't need you butting in. He snarls as he whirls at the rest of the foragers, demanding to know if they have a problem. They all begin to back up. How about you? He turns back to Spider-Man, his mouth agape, and a long venom tongue curls out. Oh, shock, Miguel whispers. Meanwhile, in the city, Conchetta is spying on Tyler and Dana. She listens as Tyler begins to pour his blackened heart out to Dana, telling her how he is misunderstood and how he has developed feelings for her. Dana seems to be buying all of these lies. So that's his game, Conchetta whispers to herself. But back at the forager base, Spider-Man begins looking through the abandoned computers that the foragers have found, trying to find out what this strange cyborg is, or how to shut you down, he thinks to himself as he continues to scroll, finding a way to shut it down, but then Spider-Man smashes the screen. I'm starting to think I don't like you, and that you're looking for ways to hurt me. He growls at Spider-Man, and Miguel puts up his hands, backing away. That's not true, he begins to say. You're lying! The robot shouts, leaping at him, but Miguel leaps out of the way, allowing him to slam into the door and falls to the ground. Oh, hi! The weird-looking Spider-Man says as he looks up at the gathering of foragers, all aiming their weapons at him. Blast fire rips through the room, blowing dozens of holes through the cybernetic Spider-Man's body. But the attack seemed to have no effect, and the weird-looking Spider-Man leaps among them, spouting jokes as he begins to savagely kill them. Miguel rushes past them, ignoring their screams of pain. You wanted to revive him? He's your problem, Packrat. Packrat turns, blowing a large hole through the cybernetic Spider-Man's chest, but then he leaps, throwing the forager to the ground. Before he can land the killing blow, Miguel is there to stomp him. You're helping them? Why? Cybernetic Spider-Man asks. I don't care about myself much, Miguel sighs. But the robot grabs him by the head. I get it! You want to die! I can help! the robot says, shoving Miguel's head into the hole in his chest as it begins to seal up. Suffocation or decapitation, which will happen first? He jokes as he begins to swing Miguel around the room as he is struggling. But as he begins to feel his body go limp, Miguel slashes out, ripping free some of the power cords from the robot's body. He then begins to rip them free, bringing a scream of pain from the robot as he frees himself. Give me that energy cable! I need it! The robot stammers as he leaps at Spider-Man, but Miguel twists, wrapping the cable around the robot's throat. He spins him around, slamming him into walls until his head pops off and his body falls to the ground. Miguel then drops to his knees, trying to catch his breath. You did it! Packrat shouts with joy as his men recover, but he pulls a blaster, aiming it at Miguel again. Too bad I have to kill you anyway, he says with a sigh, and Spider-Man glares at him. Move, he growls. Packrat thinks about it before smiling, raising the weapon and stepping aside so that Miguel can leave. Packrat watches through his monitors as Spider-Man strides away from the fortress. He looks over his shoulder, ordering his men to prepare to fire, but his eyes widen in shock as he sees the robot sitting up on a pile of his men's bodies, his claws bloody. Miguel turns to the ruins of Nightshade, where he then finds Xena waiting for him. She hugs him, telling him that she is worried. She takes him to Angela's grave before telling him that she is headed back to the city. I can't, not now, he tells her, explaining that he needs to get away from everything, that he can't go back. I think hiding is what I do best, he says as he turns away. So, do I say see you later? Xena asks, and he turns to her. I guess so. And there you have it, another storyline for Spider-Man 2099. Now, I wanted to make this one a little bit longer, kind of get the full encapsulating storyline here. But I hope you enjoyed today's video. We get to see Tyler Stone's new plans coming to fruition, and we also get to see basically Miguel kind of coming to the realization that nothing is ever going to work out for Spider-Man. Even when he tries to save everyone, you got villains like the big monster fighting him and then a cyborg version of himself. So now we are on issue 31, which means we have issues 31 to 37 to wrap up Spider-Man 2099. That's going to be 2 more videos for you guys right here. So make sure you subscribe, hit that like button, and turn on the notification bell, as next Wednesday we're going to bring you more. Or you can get early access if you subscribe to our Patreon for only $2. Thank you guys so much for your continued support, and we'll see you next time right here.